Welcome to the Smart Business Revolution.
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 You want a revolution?
You say you want a revolution?
Revolution. The revolution.
It's going on right now.
Welcome to The Revolution, the Smart Business Revolution podcast, where we ask today's most successful entrepreneurs to share the tools and strategies they use to build relationships and connections to grow their revenue. Now, your host for The Revolution, John Corcoran.
Hey, welcome everyone. John Corcoran here. I'm the host of the Smart Business Revolution podcast. I am also a recovering political hack and recovering lawyer. I spent many years in politics, including as a speechwriter with stints working at the Clinton White House for a California governor. I spent many years practicing law in Silicon Valley and the San Francisco Bay Area. And, in 2010, I discovered the medium of podcasting. I've been doing it ever since. And we're doing this podcast live right now on LinkedIn and Facebook. And over 10 years of hosting this show, I've had the privilege of talking to so many great top CEOs, founders, entrepreneurs, and companies and organizations ranging from YPO to EO, Activation Blizzard, talked to the CEO and founder of FreshBooks recently. It's really one of the most amazing things I've ever done for my business in my life. And I'm also the co-founder of Rise25, where we help B2B businesses with the strategy and production they need to create a podcast that produces tremendous ROI and connects them with their ideal prospects and referral partners. And so today, we're actually going to be talking about some of these different topics. But first, before we do that, I want to give a quick shout out to Michael Roderick of Small Pond Enterprises. He's a good friend of the business and one of the most giving entrepreneurs out there. And we just thought of him because we're going to be talking about some of the principles that he espouses as well around how to build better relationships. And I'm excited because my guest is my business partner and friend, Dr. Jeremy Weisz.
Do you see the full media team behind the scenes working on all the items that you're talking about that just magically appear on the screen?
Running around behind the scenes. You don't see them on. They're all off camera. So what we're going to be talking about today is what a B2B business should consider when starting a podcast. What types of questions they should really be asking. We're going to run through those real quick. Before we get to that, though, this episode is brought to you by Rise25 Media. Rise25 helps B2B businesses get clients, referrals, and strategic partnerships with done-for-you podcasts and content marketing. You're listening right now to a podcast. And so if you've ever thought once about whether you should do it yourself, I say it's one of the best things you could ever do. And we try to make it as easy as listening to a podcast. And we really specialize in helping B2B businesses with a high client lifetime value to create a profitable podcast. So to learn more about that, go to rise25.com, rise25media.com, or email support@rise25media.com. All right. So Dr. J, let's hop into this topic. Let's break it down for, let's say that there's a B2B business listening to this right now and they're seeing, podcasting is a hot topic right now. What are the questions they should be asking?
I mean, the first one you and I talk about heavily is how do you ensure you get ROI from a podcast? Because, we see a lot of people start and then stop. And the biggest reason we see people stop is because they're not getting ROI. They could love doing it. They have a passion for it, but it's not sustainable if it's not producing ROI for the business. And so the question is, how do you make sure the podcast produces ROI, right? And it's all about the strategy. It's all about, you obviously, it goes without saying, and people always ask this, but the content's going to be amazing, right? We make sure that the content's amazing, right? You have guests that are knowledgeable, that are experts. You yourself are an expert. But the strategy of, who do you have on, what topics do you cover is a big deal when it comes to the podcast.
Yeah. And really the reason why ROI is so important is because if you want to do it long-term, if you want to do it sustainably and profitably, which is really what we want for people, we don't want people to start something, do it for 3 months and then peter out. Then you got to get return for your efforts, or else we've seen it over 10 years of doing a podcast. Both of you, both of us, we've seen so many people start and stop. And the reason that people start and stop, it's always because they're not getting that kind of return. All right. So that's point number one. What's point number two?
Well, the other one is people always ask us, how do I get amazing guests to say yes? And we have another episode people should check out, which is about how do you cold email any VIP? So definitely check that out. But how do you get guests to say yes? And oftentimes, John, we go to the coldest of colds, okay? And we forget about our own network. Our own network, who has a great network. So before you're thinking, I want to get, I don't know, Tony Robbins on, I want to get Elon Musk on, why don't you look at people who are in your own network who are experts at what they do? Or maybe it's not someone you necessarily will be a fit for your podcast, but it's someone that knows a lot of people that could introduce you to other people.
Yeah, and those are always an easier way of smoothing the process to get people to say yes to be a guest on your podcast, because ultimately the podcast is a relationship building tool. It's a tool for business development. It's a tool for up-leveling your network, for meeting new people, especially in these crazy times, coronavirus, where people are stuck at home. You can't have social gatherings. It's more difficult, but even beyond, once we get past this phase, I think that a lot of the changes will be longer lasting, where people are going to realize they don't want to travel as much, but they still want to build relationships with people from afar. All right. So that's
check out how to cold email any VIP episode. We go into greater detail, but really we walk people through how do you have great copywriting skills that you can draft outreach messages to anyone, but start with low hanging fruit first. So number 3.
So question number 1 was, how will you ensure I'll get ROI from my podcast? Question number 2, how to get great guests to say yes. Take us through question number 3 is, are you really speaking to someone who has a personal experience with creating and producing profitable podcasts? Yeah. And I think, go ahead on that one.
Go ahead. Yeah. When you're asking about
I think the point behind that is that, look, there may be people who can get you up and running, who can get you on platforms.
Well, it's also like anyone could turn on a mic. You're like, I'm just going to do this myself. I'm going to turn on the mic and publish it, which you can do.
Yeah. And that was my story. I tried to bootstrap it from the beginning. I was actually practicing law at the time. And I kind of tried to, back then it was hard to get someone to help you with the process. But, I really got bogged down in the process. I was trying to oversee multiple different people who did different pieces. Too much of it had to go through me, which I just dropped the ball on, or I didn't enjoy doing. So I almost gave up. You actually saved me. 1 year I only had only put out 7 episodes, even though I was intending for it to be a weekly podcast. And you helped me put better systems in place that helped me to do that. So you really have to have someone who has an eye on how to create a profitable podcast, because otherwise, and that was the other big thing that you helped me with, was you helped me realize that I needed to steer my efforts towards profit, getting ROI from the podcast, not getting stuck in the weeds. And so then I was much more motivated to keep doing it.
It's kind of intoxicating in a way, because when you have it, you can reach out to and get amazing people on, but those amazing people may not serve what your mission is for the business as well.
Exactly. Right. And that's the problem with when you start getting incoming solicitations as well. So question number 4, Jeremy, take us through that one.
How do you turn interviews into long-lasting relationships and referral partnerships and strategic partnerships? Okay. And the biggest mistake people make is not thinking about what you do after the interview's done, right? So continuing to follow up. We've all heard this in any relationship, it's all in the follow-up. So you want to continue to have some post-interview collaboration and conversations. Yeah. And so first of all, the lowest hanging fruit is sometimes you put an episode out and you don't even message the person that it's out, right? You did all this work and all you do is email the person, here it is, it's live.
Yep.
Share it, email people about it. People don't do that.
Yeah.
Then they don't put it on put it on a social media and go, hey, I just had John Corcoran on, he's amazing. Check it out. Tag John. So there's so many things you could do. That's just 2. I know when we're chatting with people, we go through, we have at least 11 that we've written down that we go over in detail, but those are just 2 really simple ones.
Yeah. And, that's a big pain point that people approach us about. They say, like, people have been doing a podcast. They say, I've been doing it for a little bit, but I haven't gotten any clients out of it. I haven't gotten any referrals out of it, and those are the people who are on the verge of quitting. And I hate seeing that, because I've found the podcast to be the best tool for exploring collaborations ever created, because it gives you this opportunity to get to know someone better. They get to know you, and then you explore other opportunities in which we can collaborate in some way where I can support you, you can support me. And so if you make those mistakes, then you just don't get those great results out of it. So fifth question, Jeremy, what's the fifth question?
That, I mean, John, in general, what we look for in our life and the way you build any relationship is you give, and you don't expect anything in return. So what we love about the podcast is it gives you an avenue to give to your best relationships and profile them and their thought leadership. So anyways.
So the fifth question to ask. Yeah.
Well, again, this goes into big mistakes we've seen, right? So are you trying to do it yourself, both strategy and execution, or do you have a team overseeing it? And a big mistake we see, even with highly, highly successful, and I don't know, John, if you want to tell the story about someone we are talking to, and I don't know if their business was doing over $10 million, but what they were doing, what they were actually doing.
There's someone I was talking to recently who, and I think people make these mistakes sometimes in their business, but they were stuck in the weeds on their business. They were actually kind of like the technical expert in the business. They were responsible for technical breakdowns, uploading things to the website. It was a massive business. It was definitely something that should have been delegated, so I think a lot of times people make the mistake of they try and be the person overseeing different pieces. And when you have a cohesive project, like a podcast, you should not be the one who's responsible for overseeing the production on that, or if there's a breakdown. So personally, that's why we built our business the way that we did, is we decided that there's got to be one team that oversees the strategy, the accountability, and the execution and the production, because they are really intertwined with one another. They're related to one another. And this happens all the time where we talk to people that, because of the way they do the production, they end up spending 12 hours a week, on this initiative when it could take a half an hour, Yeah. And so you make different decisions.
All those things.
Yeah. So you make different decisions about these things. Then then you're able to redirect that energy and that effort to things that are actually going to move the needle for the business, not, on the production side.
Yeah. I mean, we believe that the business owner should be doing two things, and the team of the business owner should be doing two things: one, running the business, and two, building the relationships. And then that's it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So we're short on time here. That was a great quick episode with an overview on what questions a B2B business should consider when starting a podcast. Dr. J, remind everyone where people can contact you or connect with us.
Yeah, Rise25.com. You could watch a video of John and I bantering like an old married couple. That's what we do behind the scenes and in front of the scenes. So Rise25.com. There's a video on there, and you could email support@rise25media.com.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you for listening to the Smart Business Revolution podcast with John Corcoran. Find out more at smartbusinessrevolution.com. And while you're there, sign up for our email list and join the revolution. Revolution. And be listening for the next episode of the Smart Business Revolution podcast.